galaxies, unfathomable distances, exploding stars, diamond planets, black holes. Space is mind-blowingly, fantastically awesome. Or you could say, space is freaking awesome. That's what greets you when you travel to Adler. Adler Planetarium is America's first planetarium. It is more than a museum. It's a classroom, it's a laboratory, it's a community coming together to explore the universe together. Founded in 1930 by business leader Max Adler, the planetarium is a leader in public engagement. Each year, 600,000 visitors experience the interactive exhibits, the live planetarium shows, the hands-on, minds-on STEM education, and the world-class exhibits. Now, launching into space was not always easy or successful, yet each mission yielded critical learnings to ensure space exploration today. Think of launching into the cloud like launching into space. At first, it was new territory. There were lots of challenges. But hundreds and thousands of migrations later, the cloud migration journey is successful. We at Cloudbakers had the privilege to travel with the Adler crew on their G Suite migration journey. We are here today to share that experience with you. There are 3 components that will ensure a successful cloud migration: preparation, ease, and experience. Let's dive into that further. Would you mind introducing yourself, telling us who you are and your role in the migration?
Sure. My name is Tom Morris, and I am the systems engineer at the Adler Planetarium. I support about 160 servers, both physical and virtual. And my role in this project was to connect with our on-site infrastructure and help connect that to Google Cloud in order to support the migration.
My name is Katie Bennett. I'm the technical support analyst at the Adler. I support a little over 300 users, and my role in this project was to assist with training internally, as well as make sure everybody is able to do their job productively.
My name is Mike Meyer. I am the manager of cloud engineering at Cloudbakers. I've been migrating G Suite for about 6 years now. And my role in this project in particular was to make sure that the users have all of their data, as well as to help the Adler team translate their business policies into the proper settings in G Suite.
Hi everyone, I'm Whitney Brown. I lead our change and adoption practice at Cloudbakers. My role in this project was focused on end user happiness. So I make sure that end users have all the knowledge and skills they need to continue to do their work with minimal impact throughout the migration and after go live.
Great. Let me just ask a quick question to the audience. How many of you have been to Adler Planetarium? Okay, great, quite a few. I highly recommend it. One of the things I like about it is that there's a human component to it. They really focus on the humans behind the success and the progress and the accomplishments. And they really relate the past to educate, to relate, and to teach the future generations. So Tom, let's dive into a little bit about the humans behind the transformation here at Adler. Tell us about the technology environment before you migrated over.
We were mainly a Microsoft consumer. We had Microsoft Office on the end user computers supported by Exchange, Active Directory, and a Windows file server for shares. We were missing some components. We hadn't implemented the entire Microsoft suite, so we didn't have instant messaging with Skype for Business, and we were also missing an intranet from a product like SharePoint, which caused some of our users frustration for not having access to those types of collaborative tools.
Okay. What were some of those challenges that you had that were related to that?
Well, we're a mixed environment, so we had some people on Mac, some people on PCs, some people who really only use mobile devices. And even though they were all using the same tools, it was a little different on each platform. So people weren't really sure how to use it. It kind of created a little bit of an IT bottleneck. But we also didn't really have any guidelines for sharing internally or externally. So it created a little bit of shadow IT. People started to create their own G Suite accounts and their own other file sharing accounts just because they needed a way to share files with external partners.
Okay, so it's a really kind of a fragmented environment. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the preparation leading up to the migration?
Sure. We knew this would be a significant impact to our organization. So from the very beginning, even as we were telling the organization that this change was coming, we worked with our executive team and made sure that we had buy-in from all of our VPs. And then we actually met with each one of our departments before even making a choice on what cloud platform to gather what needs they had, what needs weren't being met by the current platform that we had. And we took all of those sessions and we consolidated all of our notes together to look for common themes. And we even went as far as to get into both of the major cloud platforms and do proofs of concept and actually demoed both platforms for our users so that they could see their needs could be met by either of these products, and kind of alleviated concerns that they may have had going to a cloud platform before we had even decided which cloud platform. And then we ultimately made a recommendation to our executive team, but had them to decide which platform. And surprise, we chose Google.
Big surprise. Okay, so a lot of systems requirements and also just really some trial too with some POCs as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Whitney, can you share with us a little bit about how Cloud Bakers prepared for the migration?
Sure. So, well, first, the Adler team kind of prepared for us, so thanks, guys. They laid the foundation very well by actually going through the process of meeting with different people across the organization and engaging different stakeholders. So that foundation was laid prior to our involvement, even with the project itself. Something we have to think about here and we have to remember over the course of a migration is that change is happening all the time. It's happening outside of work, it's happening at work. We're not immune to that, and it's not happening in one department. So the approach of reaching out to every stakeholder increases buy-in over time. It increases adoption of a tool or a platform like G Suite. What we also have to remember, though, is change is a process. It doesn't end when the migration is over, and it definitely started well before the migration started with the Adler team actually giving folks a heads up and asking for their opinions and asking them what would be impacted and what they're looking for in a new platform. We also have a responsibility to sort of guide people through the process of change and understand that it's not a straight line. It kind of goes up and down and ebbs and flows. For those in the room, go ahead and raise your hand for me if you've been part of like a large change at your organization. Okay, great. Were you consulted at all about that change? Raise your hand if you were consulted. Okay, so a few hands, awesome, well done to the organizations that you're a part of. But we have to remember that that's not always the case. What the Adler team did actually did significantly impact this project in a very positive way.
That's great. And I know one of Adler's core values is results-oriented planning, and it sounds like that you were true to that. That was very evident in this process, that the planning and preparation were solid. So let's talk a little bit about why you chose to use a partner.
Well, for us, it was primarily a labor logistic. We are a fairly small team. We were also a fairly newly formed team, and we had taken on a large enough backlog of projects as it was, which I'm sure is true at a lot of nonprofits. So we knew a project this large, we would need some external help just from a number of people perspective. We also didn't really have time to try and learn how to migrate from one platform to another. because we knew it would be a one-time only thing, and we didn't think that that would be time well invested for us to learn how to do it once when we needed to be working on these other projects. So we also knew we needed to engage somebody that this is their one of their core jobs. We chose Cloudbakers because they were one of the folks recommended to us from Google, and they were willing to work with an organization our size because we are smaller than some.
Okay. Mike, can you talk a little bit about how Cloudbakers prepared for the migration?
Yeah, so from the technical perspective, as Whitney said, a lot of the work was done for us by Tom, going around to all of his different user groups and getting their technical requirements as well. Because they really went above and beyond what most of our customers tend to do. So they took the initiative and really pulled through there in a way that we don't see too often. But that also made it very easy for us then to know that there was not a significant technical problem looming in the background that we haven't found out about yet. So having the the upfront checklist of that everything that we're going to be doing is going to be A-OK for all of their users really went a long way to be able to help us plan for all of the different settings that we would need to configure in their G Suite before their users actually got onto the platform.
Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit about implementation. How did you prepare for the implementation?
Well, to start, we wanted to focus a little bit on the communication. We didn't have an intranet site, so we set up a WordPress site that we used to, post timelines, give a way for people to ask questions, give feedback, and it got used a lot. People were checking it often just to see what the status of the project was.
And how did Cloudbakers prepare for the implementation?
For a project like this one, which is fairly large and complex in that it's across the entire organization and it involves a technology platform, we know that about 80 to 100% of the success of that project depends on people changing the way that they do their work. They actually have to change their day-to-day work. So what we need to do is actually make the focus of our change management and adoption practices as personal as possible. And that's what the Adler team really did. That's what they started with, and we wanted to continue that throughout the process. For those who raised their hand earlier, for those that were part of a large change at your organization, did you have to change your day-to-day? Raise your hand if your day-to-day changed, your tasks that you completed on a regular basis changed. Yes? Okay. How did that make you feel? Just shout it out. Uneasy. Uneasy, okay. Anyone else? Disoriented? Okay. Yes, right? So those individual concerns are really, really important and have to be addressed over the course of the migration. This is all happening in the background from the end user side. There's a lot that happens on the tech side. I'm not part of that. I let that be done by the geniuses over here. But on the end user side, what we're doing is continuing to show that change is possible, not that change is happening to you. Not only is your day-to-day going to change, but you're going to be successful in that change, and we're going to support you throughout that process.
What were some key strategies or tactics that you used in order to accomplish that?
So as Tom and Katie mentioned, they already did some requirements gathering well in advance, but we did use an end user discovery, which is just a survey that we send out to the organization to really learn about users and what they're excited about, what they're concerned about. Beyond that, we put together a communications plan for the duration of the migration. We leveraged Chris Comerford, who is Adler's CIO, a very visible, highly engaged sponsor. So if I have any executive sponsors in the room, make sure you're quite visible. Be excited. Be everywhere that people want you to be when it's related to a big change like this. We also took all of that information, the communications, the Adler team's insight for their organization, and we put together resource guides. We had a full week of training, 8 different types of training actually, from beginner to power user. We actually engaged some folks who had some concerns about security. So we brought in HR, we brought in managers, we had a session just for them to sort of calm some of those fears around sharing documents and the security of documents. And actually, after the training was over, the Adler team even took it a step further because they wanted to keep being visible, keep engaging with folks, and they had office hours throughout the week and well after.
Katie, how did you structure those office hours?
Well, we held the office hours like twice a week in our executive lobby. It's an area that everyone has to pass through to get to their own office. So people don't like to feel like they're bothering IT, so it was a way to make us visible and give people a reason to ask us questions. So even when they didn't know they had questions, they would see us and think, oh, I did have a question about this. We're still holding them today, and we still get at least one question a week.
So you could call it accessibility, but it was kind of a roadblock. They had to kind of go past you in order to.
Yes.
So you were very accessible via roadblock. Excellent. Tom, let's shift from the user perspective to the technical perspective, and let's talk about how the implementation of the technical infrastructure was.
Sure. Well, we decided fairly early on that we were going to continue to use Active Directory for on-site identity management. So one of our first tasks was connecting Active Directory to Google Cloud, and fortunately they provide a tool for that, GCDS. And so we use that to initially provision all of our users. And then we also use password sync so that they didn't have to have a separate password for their Google account. With this project, it kind of lined up with also the time frame that we needed to change our spam filtering. So we decided to provision users a little bit earlier than we would have simply for the migration, so that we could actually utilize a feature that Google provides where you can pass your mail through Google and still have it delivered to your on-site Exchange server, but then take advantage of their spam filtering. But it caused a little bit of a headache for Mike later. So I apologize for that, Mike, I'm sorry. Because those user accounts not only had some already gone out, Katie mentioned earlier, there was some shadow IT. A lot of our users had already gone out and subscribed to Google services using their work email address. And we were now trying to provision another account with that same email address, so that caused conflicting accounts. It also caused an issue with the import of mail from our existing platform, but Mike will speak to that a little bit more.
Thanks, Tom. So as far as the user provisioning goes, there was users that had essentially a duplicate account now, that they had a corporately controlled account, plus then they also had their consumer account. So normally with most processes, with most projects that we have, there's a tool that Google provides that allows us to roll those users into your G Suite by sending them an invitation. However, that's just one of the many small pieces of the puzzle, though, that go together, that if you haven't done a migration before, that you might not necessarily be aware of. So that's really where we tried to come in right away and say, like, hold on, here's the order of everything that we really need to do in order to not impact users too badly. The other part, though, too, was with the spam filtering. With that implementation that they had turned on, it only kept the last 30 days of mail in that user's online Google account. So when it came time to doing their migration, we had to flip off that spam filtering and migrate all of their email over the course of a weekend. So that way they wouldn't get inundated with spam while there was no spam filter on their account forwarding over to their Exchange account. So there's a ton of different moving pieces that's why we always recommend using a partner. Go with somebody who has the experience of doing this before many, many times, because there's a lot of different parts and pieces of this that are a little bit more complicated than might at first seem.
Mike, how did this migration compare to others that you've managed and seen in the past?
So this one was very successful, I would say, a lot down to the communications that we had with the Adler team. So part of that was having a shared chat channel with them, so we were able to communicate any issues right away. We also like being accessible on Go Live very easily, so that way they were able to reach out to us if any of their users came to them indirectly from our support staff that was on site for their Go Live. As far as the data migration piece goes, there's a dozen different tools out there that'll get your data from point A to point B. And really what we usually see for either a successful versus a very successful project is really on the change management side. So it's the planning and the execution of that plan that really makes the difference here.
Okay. So lots of preparation, lots of communication, lots of collaboration. That gets you to being on Google. What was it like when you finally were live on Google?
It was a really quiet day. did all the communication before, so even though there was that little hiccup of the emails from the past 30 days that weren't fully updated, we told everyone so they were aware of it ahead of time. For some people, that was a bigger issue than other, depending on how much email you get. But other than that, there weren't really any issues. It was just a little bit of some teaching moments. People weren't sure how to turn off conversation view. People wanted split pane view. So that was just gave us an opportunity to show the settings in Google, because people didn't always remember from training, which is good, which is why we were there. And some people had slashes in their folder names, so that created sublabels. But that was just a one-time fix, and it wouldn't happen again.
Okay. And Tom, how was Go Live from a technical perspective?
For me, it was actually pretty quiet also. We, having switched over our mail routing sometime when we made the spam filtering change, did give us the advantage of me being able to switch devices that automatically email out, like our copiers. I was able to switch that over to the Google platform before the Go Live day, so I wasn't running around that day trying to reconfigure a bunch of devices to start using Google to send out email. So I really kind of just assisted with end user support and sat out there and supported Katie and Joel and Whitney and Zach to make sure our users were comfortable and knew how to operate the platform.
And how did this initiative compare to other IT initiatives that you've led in the past?
Our last email migration, which was a team previous to ours, so I wasn't actually involved with that, but I heard a lot from our users about how poorly that one went. It was from a relatively unknown platform to Exchange, and there were technical issues, and there were definitely change management issues. A lot of our users weren't sure how to use Exchange, and that carried through. A lot of our users kind of were very apprehensive about this migration, and I think they really started to see a difference when we started training and when we started the communication with them to let them know that this change was coming months in advance of the actual change happening. And then I think the Go Live day, I think they were all really quietly reassured that technically it went well also. All of their email was there, and they were able to access it in the way that they expected to access it.
So it was helpful that their expectations were pretty low.
I suppose, yes.
That's sometimes very helpful, right? Cloud Bakers, from your perspective, how was the Go Live, the transition?
Quiet go lives are my favorite go lives, both question and resistance wise. I think it's indicative of the foundation that was laid by the Adler team well in advance of the project, but also, as Tom and Katie had mentioned, the ongoing communication, which was consistent. Same message for weeks and weeks leading up to this. It's sort of the culmination of everything that you've shared. You're hoping they've read the FAQ, they came to training, maybe they even watched the recording of training one more time if they're really awesome students. Hopefully they got into their account and really tried to test things out and try. But that being said, go lives are never without issues. They're never without concerns and questions, and we have to remember that even those really small things, like my labels look different. I don't like the way that my mail is displayed in my inbox. Those can really turn someone into a resistor when they were almost there. They were ready, they were excited. What it can also do is create frustration where there wasn't really frustration. And what that ends up doing, if not addressed, is really not getting someone to the point where they are a true adopter of the platform. And that's what we want. We want constant transformation, really getting into G Suite, really using those tools and using them to their fullest extent.
Okay. And how long has it been since you've been on Google? Sorry.
We gave our users accounts about a year ago, and the actual go live day was mid-October last year.
Okay, so how is it now?
Well, now that our users have the tools that they need to actually collaborate, much better. We weren't really able to share externally before without using email, and email has a lot of limitations. So for people to be able to just easily collaborate externally, we work with a lot of external entities, not only other organizations, but a lot of volunteers. And so being on a platform that it's so much easier to collaborate outside the organization has really helped us out.
That's great.
Jump in here really quick because I want to give some kudos to the Adler team. Something that we have to remember about change management is that it's not over when the project's over, and I think Tom is kind of alluding to this now. But I don't want to forget about their effort after the training was over, after the migration was over. They didn't pat themselves on the back and say, well done. Okay, we're good now. Everyone's on G Suite. What they did is they actually continued training and continued providing resources. And that's really, really important to remember to keep supporting users in a variety of ways, not just with questions for the help desk.
Yeah, and that should happen a lot because these are the tools that people use every day, and things change. It's a cloud platform. There's updates, and usually, people can figure it out on their own because the changes are so minor. But still, we need a way for people to ask the questions. And during the training before the migration, they don't know what they don't know yet. And during our training, the new calendar update went through in the middle of it. So the users got to see how, how minimal the change was, but that you could still, go around it. I don't know.
Right, yeah. I refreshed my calendar, and then it was the new calendar UI. So everyone who was in the room got to watch me find where some of the buttons were, where they weren't before. And I think what is exciting about that is that it took me a couple of seconds to find those buttons and to see how things had changed. The learning curve was not steep. So thanks, Google, for that update in the middle, but also thanks, Mike, because you probably turned on the new calendar, didn't you?
There you go. Never know what you can expect. Okay, so what's next? What's next for Adler?
Well, we are currently working to migrate off of our file server. We decided pretty early on that we were going to stage this migration in phases, and the cutover that we did last October was only for email and calendar. So we're currently moving to team drives, and we've been migrating department by department. It's not only have people started using all of the other Google tools, but the fact that you have access to, at an API level, where when you get into a situation and there's some very customized functionality that you may need to provide for users, you have access to that. So really, even some of the bigger custom challenges that we've come up, Google's been able to take care of for us. We've been able to get in and create functionality that still works to support our users.
That's great. That's great. Focusing more on that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing your experience with the audience today. The three components of preparation and ease and experience, both from the reseller side or the partner side and the client, is really critical to ensuring success. We'd like to leave you, before we open up with questions, we'd like to leave you with a freaking awesome quote that hangs proudly in Adler by John F. Kennedy. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and our skills. Change can be difficult, but leaders know that change can be managed effectively and is critical to propel their organizations forward. And in Adler's case, to educate, to relate, and to inspire our next generation about the universe and exploration.